Hi, I'm Dr. Mercola, and welcome back, and thank you for joining us for episode 4 of Diet Against Disease. Let's look back at some of the important lessons we learned in episode 3. We've learned that how we view cancer as scientists, researchers, and the medical community is critical. Is it a genetic disease where we have no control over or influence in how it occurs or how we treat it? Simply how we view it can make or break the treatment therapy that is presented to us. We've learned that there is a significant imbalance between those who experience a remarkable and tragic struggle as victims of this disease and the unimaginable profit, on the other hand, that is created for drug manufacturers. Yet, despite exploring the endless frustrations of cancer victims and survivors, there remains very simple solutions that are quite effective and showing exceptional results. While they have remained hidden from the public view up until now, we shed a bright light on some hopeful research and studies on some very helpful and practical alternative strategies. Now, we shift to the next episode that exposes more lies, truths, and hidden gems in the world of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and even weight loss. We will reveal that diabetes is being successfully treated through a diet discovered over 100 years ago. Why skeletal mass is so important and how you can preserve it and actually increase it. And finally, the top 3 diseases, cancer, heart disease, and diabetes, can all be effectively treated by eliminating inflammatory causing processed foods. And how a popular elimination style of eating has too few macronutrients can actually have a negative impact on your gut microbiome. Finally, you will learn that you have the power to really transform your biology today, not only in you, but also in your children and your grandchildren.
I want to introduce you to Gina, an active, healthy woman who struggled increasingly with weight issues and felt so lost and uncomfortable in her own skin. Maybe you can relate.
Nothing in my body functioned right. Everything hurt. I literally could not take more than 4 steps without extreme muscle burn. Everyone thought I was nuts. If I went for help, they would misdiagnose me and they would dish out prescriptions for diseases that I believed were symptoms of a bigger problem. So that was misery, to just suffer, and keep getting heavier and heavier. It was very difficult to get through.
What are you leaving out?
How truly difficult and how painful and how frustrating to be that sick is. It's, ugh. But I'm a fighter.
Why? Why was having your body out of control?
Okay, so take you
Yeah.
and wake up tomorrow, your brain doesn't work right and you're 40 pounds heavier and everything hurts. Tomorrow, poof. Get out of bed and function and do everything you normally do with your brain not working right, 40 pounds heavier, and pain everywhere. And then maybe you'll understand how traumatic it is to be like sick, super sick without a name, or with 50 million names, or no name. I kept saying, where did it come from? Where did it come from? Where did it come from? So yeah, much trauma. Very difficult, extremely difficult, because nobody understands.
Hi, this is Dr. Mercola, and I hope you're enjoying the free series. And I want to give a special thank you to those of you that purchased the Fat for Fuel online course. The online course is designed to help you implement the tools and principles you've learned in Diet Against Disease so you can start achieving your health goals today. So take advantage of this limited time, massive savings during this free screening of Diet Against Disease. Learn more by clicking the link below.
Obesity has become one of the big, huge epidemics in our environment, obviously. You've got 1 in 3, 1 in 4 adults, depending on the city in America, that are obese now. You would think that we had figured this out by now as scientists, clinicians, doctors, etc. We still are practicing very antiquated science at the clinical level when it comes to this word obesity and this clinical condition. It's easy as a scientist to kind of boil that down to some theoreticals. but very few things are as intense as being overweight or being obese and being out in the community. There are so many really damaging beliefs and suppositions and prejudice against obesity. And you would think that with this many of us obese, that would have really changed. And I think there is definitely a bending of the social norms as more and more people do become obese. You can see it in our models, you can see it even in the social media environment and all this. But nonetheless, for somebody who has to walk out into the world with obesity, it is something that is a really enormous psychological challenge as well as physical challenge.
In many ways, I was a different person when I was obese. There's something about starting the day not being able to tie your shoes that just limits your ability to show up and be who you really are. I had failed so many times, and it was such a groundhog day, like a groundhog life, really. Like, I had tried to lose weight. I had been so sincere at each attempt, believing in it wholeheartedly, giving 150% to each attempt, and then saw it work for a little while, and then some kind of strange time warp where a few months in the future I would be back as fat as ever and having a hard time tying my shoes and not wanting to leave the house, not able to put on clothes and feel good. And having gone through that not just 5 times or 10 times, but like 20, 30, however many times, just over and over and over again, there was this desperation and this fear, really, that this was my lot in life. No, I was addicted to crystal meth as a teenager, and in my later teens, crack cocaine. Dropped out of high school, lots of drug-induced psychosis. My life got really bad, and I feel qualified to talk about what addiction feels like, and food addiction was worse for me. Nothing is harder to kick than food. And I went into my years of food addiction and obesity already knowing that I was an addict, and I knew that I had an addictive brain. I knew that about myself. And as I was experiencing my food addiction and my obesity sort of play out, I was seeing it through the lens of addiction. I wasn't naive to that reality.
I had been doing modeling and even doing fitness modeling. I mean, I was really in peak shape, and especially when I'm in really peak shape, you have low body fat. Well, I had years prior made the mistake, which I realize now, of getting saline implants, so breast implants. So I'm very open about it now. I've written a book about it. I had a bad manufacturer. The particular manufacturer I had was known for having leaky valves. So it was leaking, and instead of living inside mold, mold was living inside me. So I was getting sicker and sicker within months of having those implants and didn't know, and just continued to kind of spiral downward. So I did get them removed, but not before I gained a large amount of weight. I probably gained 40 pounds within 6 months and I'm tall, but still that was a lot of weight, and especially that it went all around the middle because my cortisol levels were up and I had mold poisoning that was undiagnosed. People would even ask me sometimes if I was pregnant because I was distended stomach and just so many symptoms after the implants. And then we found out from a test that I had Lyme disease from some friends who said I should get a test, but I think it was just the perfect storm.
That must have been pretty shocking, to feel the downward spiral for you. And because you had been used to being thin and you were a model, and then you had to adjust to being overweight. And for you, was it tough, to adjust and to not feel confident in your body anymore? I mean, what was your experience?
Yes, it definitely was. And I remember having to go somewhere to try clothes on. I didn't even want to. I don't like to go shopping when I can. I avoid it when I can, but sometimes you're forced to go get outfits for things or events because the pant size had grown so much that I was wearing. And I think that some people could be the weight that I was and be very healthy, but again, for me, it wasn't muscle, it wasn't toned, it was body fat and unhealthy fat around the middle, which I don't think most people really want to have. I had felt so bad for so long, to the point where I really felt like there was no light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, I just felt like there would be days where my energy was so low that I would just kind of almost space out or like be sitting there and really, if you want me to be, just tell you laid out on the table, where I would be like drooling and then like come back to, and literally I'd be drooling and realizing, did I black out or something, like with my mouth open? It was that bad.
It's terrifying and it's excruciating. You know, you're expected to think clearly when you can't think clearly. You're expected to make good decisions when you can't sleep right, you can't eat right, you can't function right. Your muscles don't work right, your skin doesn't work right, your eyesight isn't working right. Everything just goes crazy. And you're like, wait, what happened? It's, from a healthy point of view, it's easy to give advice, you know, oh, fix it, you know, watch what you eat. So many people are like, calorie in, calorie out, you must be eating horribly, you're doing something. And I'm like, no, I'm doing everything right. I live on raw foods, salads, I exercise constantly, I sleep, I'm healthy, I've always slept. 40 plus pounds of bloating misery later, something went wrong. And I attribute it to the Klonopin. I think it just was the straw from the toxic reaction, and it was very hard.
We've kind of beat people up in America saying the reason you're obese is because you don't exercise enough and you eat too much. Well, that's not really the case. The reason we're obese is because we're eating the wrong types of foods and we're addicted to sugar. So once you get rid of the sugar, you realize how much your sugar cravings go down and how easy it is to continue that lifestyle. That's probably the biggest shocker to people once they get the sugar and carbs out of their diet, how easy it is to maintain.
So it's a real disservice when they walk into a clinic and say, Doc, I want to lose weight, and we immediately say, well, you're eating too much. You got to cut back on what you're eating. And that disservice is because we immediately boil all nutrition down to this existence of calories. There is no question that you have to stop eating sugar and junk food and all of this if you want to be healthy. But you have met people who eat sugar and junk food and everything and are not obese. So we need to get over our belief that calories equals obesity. And yet in this huge industry, multi-billion-dollar industry of diets and fad diets and doctor-driven diets and everything else, we continue to be fixed on this belief that calories equals fat. That is not true. You've seen it yourself, you've seen family members live a lifestyle that should, for all intents and purposes, look like obesity is related exactly to the calories they're consuming, and yet they're skinny. How is that possible? How is it possible that somebody can eat junk food and stay skinny, or eat as healthy as they possibly can and become obese? So the study in 2014 showed something pretty amazing. They took the bacteria out of the intestines of obese humans, put them into rodents, and within a month those rodents became obese eating the same food. Same calories, same everything, changed the bacteria from an obese human to the obese rodent, and things all shift to the same metabolism. They then took the bacteria from thin people and put those in rodents, and no matter what they did to those rodents, they couldn't overfeed them into the state of obesity. And so the extraordinary start point for a healthy body and healthy metabolism has nothing to do with the calories you're eating. It has to do with the bacteria that are in your intestines. So how the heck are you going to plan for that? How are you going to, as somebody who is struggling with obesity, start to transform your gut? The good news is you don't have to starve yourself into skinniness. You need to live yourself into skinniness. And how the heck is that going to happen? You're going to get out of your current routine. Whatever your routine is right now is what programmed the bacteria that are keeping you obese. You need to break out of that routine, get outside, start a garden, go hiking, go find some new territory of the ecosystem you've never touched. Change your bacteria. Here's an extraordinary thing for us to think about, is we share bacteria in a household. If you are a loved one of somebody who's struggling with obesity and you live with them, you need to change as much as they need to change. I see this happen very frequently. Parents will bring in a child who's starting to become obese and they're really worried about it. And they keep telling the child to don't eat this or cut back on calories and everything else. But in fact, it's the bacterial environment around that child that's starting to force this shift. So whether adult or child, stop thinking about them as an individual who's overeating and start thinking about them as somebody who's not connected to a healthy ecosystem or biome. And so what does that look like? Get outside, go to lots of different environments, and eat lots of variety. We're going to stop eating for calories and we're going to start eating for micronutrients. The micronutrients on your plate are represented by the color. If your plate looks like 3 colors, you got the yellow macaroni and a brown piece of meat and a little bit of green, you got 3. In contrast, if you create a plate that's got radishes and peppers and incredible colors of quinoa that have 4 different colors of tans and browns all through that single grain, you got black rice, or you got incredible salsas and sauces and herbs that are throwing in there, you're eating the rainbow. Now your body is getting this incredible diversity of micronutrients. Not only do those fuel your cells for health, each of those micronutrients are importantly going to select for a very specific bacterial environment. And so the more micronutrients, the more color you can get on your plate, the more beneficial and diverse that bowel flora, the ecosystem within your gut, is going to be. And so start really having a passion for the color on your plate. I want you to start to think about eating much like an artist would think about its palette of colors that's going to go onto the canvas. You are painting yourself every time you make a meal. You are painting life and vigor into yourself with every plate you prepare. Think about that for your children's lunches. How many colors are you getting into their lunch? How many colors are you getting onto your plate at night? How many colors do you share with family when you get together? And so challenge yourself. When you walk into a grocery store, you know exactly what it looks like when you go into one of these huge natural food stores that have these extraordinary produce sections that go on and on. It's like an explosion of sensory overload with the color. The white of a daikon radish, for example, that's such a just incredible backdrop to put on a plate. You get that bright white of that radish, and then you throw in some reds and blacks and purples all on top of that. What a miracle a beet is, or that rich green of the kale, or the collard, or the dandelion. Grab all of these varieties and put them back in your life. That's where you're going to rebuild that ecosystem that's going to get you from obesity, which is a narrow state, to this huge diversity of environment.
Hi, this is Dr. Mercola, and if you're enjoying the education provided in this free film series, please share it with your loved ones by clicking on the link below. It makes a massive difference, as you'll be providing them with potentially life-altering information to help them take control of their health.
Well, when it comes to weight loss, I think there's a lot of factors that come into play. And although everyone has an individual situation, I think there's some things that we could talk about. Number one is habits. People have poor eating habits, poor lifestyle habits, and habits are robbing us of being as healthy as we can possibly be. Fast food is rampant. People are eating massive amounts of food. The habits of not exercising, habits of people that are even today still smoking or vaping, like things that are very unhealthy. These are habits, and habits are formed. And like a bad habit, we need to form good habits. And I would ask the question of what can you eliminate from your diet? What can you add to your routine that's going to improve your overall health? So I think habits is a really important aspect. Along with habits come choices. And I believe that every single day you have a choice of what you put in your mouth and what you do with your body. And every single thing you put in your mouth, there's a chemical reaction that takes place, good or bad. Something's gonna happen. It's either gonna be a positive reaction or a negative reaction. So I believe the choices of what you make, of what you put in your body, will have an energetic exchange of everything, how you deal with someone in a relationship, as a boss, as an employee, as an employer, as a mother or a father, a son or a daughter, grandma, grandpa. Everything we do is about energy, and the energy we consume is critical. So when we look at habits, we look at choices, really important.
I had always been somebody who loved health, fitness, and nutrition, but I hit my own personal rock bottom. I had had my daughter, and at the same time of having her, I was going through a divorce. It's like the perfect storm. So you're eating more, and you are feeling down, and then you gain weight, which is also making you more depressed. So it's just this perfect storm of things going on. It makes you depressed, you eat more, you feel tired, especially if you're eating the wrong foods, you don't have the focus or the energy, so you just go down this bad rabbit hole of things. And you have to find a way out.
More than 2 out of 3 Americans are overweight, and 1 in 3 are obese. So if you fall into that category and you're interested in using cyclical nutritional ketosis, a simple way to jumpstart your progression into developing ketones, or burning fat as your primary fuel, is to use a time-honored ancient strategy. And what is it? fasting. Now, please do not confuse fasting with starvation. Fasting is voluntary. You can stop at any time. Starvation is not. Totally different. But they have profound metabolic benefits. So normally, if you've been metabolically compromised and not burning fat as your primary fuel for years or even decades, it may take you a few months or even longer to make that transition. So if you're overweight, I'd like you to seriously consider a simple strategy as water fasting. And the best resource for that I know of is a book written by Dr. Jason Fung, who is a nephrologist from the University of Toronto, and it's the Complete Guide to Fasting. I also interviewed him on my website, so if you'd like to know more details about it, but it's a really useful strategy, and it will literally jumpstart your ability to do this. It's important to know that it's just not a one-time fast, and the fast can range anywhere from a day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days to 7 days. And you could go longer, but usually it's not necessary. And in fact, it's probably more powerful to do the fast than then go back and eat some food and then do that in cycles. And rather than taking a few months, you might be able to get into producing ketones in a few weeks, which is pretty miraculous, and you'll be getting all the metabolic benefits. Now, you don't have to do this if, it probably isn't even wise to consider doing it if you're underweight or normal weight. Because then you just use a strategy that I use pretty much every day, and that is intermittent fasting. A specific type of intermittent fast called peak fasting. Now, intermittent fasting could be a wide variety of different strategies, and there's 3 primary ones, which is every other day fasting, popularized by Dr. Kristen Varaday from the University of Illinois, and then there's a 5 days on, 2 days off strategy that Dr. Michael Mosley, who wrote the book Fast Diet, did. But I think the peak fasting, where you're of type of intermittent fasting where you're taking 12 hours, a minimum of 12, but more likely 14 to 16 hours, maybe even as long as 18 hours every day, where you're not eating anything except water or drinking. Drinking water is your primary fuel, so no caloric beverages. So this is something that you work up to, you don't do right away, and it's typically wise to not have your food right before you go to bed. And why would you want to do that? Well, when you provide and you eat food, your body obviously is going to convert that to fuel. And when you fuel up your body, you fuel up the mitochondrial electron transport chains that produce the ATP. And because if you eat right before you go to bed and you're sleeping, your need for calories goes down dramatically. So the fuel is going to back up, and in the backup process, it's actually going to generate more reactive oxygen species, more secondary free radicals, and more damage. So ideally, it's best to wait 3 hours after your last meal and you're going to sleep. I sometimes will wait 5-6 hours. I'll eat my last meal at 3 or 4 o'clock and go to bed anywhere from 9 to 10. So you can do what you want, but then, you don't just keep it somewhere 14, 16 hours, and that's going to be a very useful strategy long term to continue having your body and support it in its ability to burn fat as your primary fuel.
When I started, I did a ketogenic diet. I just focused on lots of good fats and low carbs. It definitely worked. It helped with some energy levels. I did lose some weight. Easy to keep up with after the first 2 weeks. But again, after about a year and a half of being on it, I definitely just plateaued. Nothing. I didn't get any worse. I didn't get any better. And that's when I started doing a cycling and carb feasting. So now my typical week is about a day or 2 I fast. And then 2, 3, 4 days I will high fat, 20 or less of carbs and protein. And on my big carb days, 100-ish of good carbs, I decrease my fat and I'll go up to maybe 50 protein. And that's working for me. It actually gave me enough energy where I can start working out again.
Okay, but then, do you enjoy your meals now? Do you get to eat enough? Do you feel full?
Absolutely. It's very weird. I am pretty healthy. I happen to love vegetables. I like a lot of raw food. I didn't have a big problem with it. Don't eat a lot of processed. But by super focusing and tracking what you eat daily and seeing exactly what it is, it makes you feel so satisfied. You're not even hungry, you're not craving food like normal. It's like whatever, carbohydrates. I have to remind myself, it's like eat some carbs on my fasting days, because I don't feel hungry, I don't feel the need for them, I feel a million times better. I'm such a fan of the ketogenic diet, and when I tell people that's what I follow, they're like, oh, you're on a diet to lose weight, and I'm like, no, it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. It just makes sense to me, and I found a really good spot for me. I think each person would have to tweak it, the days and everything exactly for them.
Why do you think this approach is effective for the different diseases? What is it fundamentally about disease that this protocol goes after?
I think what it does, so scientists have known for a long time that caloric restriction is a way to extend life. And you see these profound effects in short-lived animals like mice. You can extend their life almost double. All the smaller metazoa organisms, worms and things, you see this huge effect. Now, the million-dollar question is, does this extend out to long-lived organisms like humans? And we don't know the answer for sure about that, if we can extend lifespan, but what we do know is periodic caloric restriction has got substantial benefits for health span. So every organism has this built-in mechanism that gets tripped that turns on these rejuvenating cellular abilities. It enhances antioxidant production, increases what's called autophagy, which is the digestion of defunct cellular debris within the cell. So it's this kind of cleaning house mechanism that's intrinsic to us, and it just has to be tripped. The problem is now our society is so flush with food and wealth that most of us never get into that state. We just continue to consume, and we never trip these, internal housekeeping abilities of ourselves. So I think just in general that's what's led to this diabetes epidemic and this probably what you call this general state of poor health in Western societies. And there's so the holy grail of all this is not to keep people in the sustained, restriction state, but to find ways to shortcut this. And so that's why, the ketogenic diet is a way to not take away energy, but to maintain the fasting state or the calorically restricted state, sort of trick the body into doing that. So that's what we're learning, is what's the optimal way to do this and what can we get away with where people don't feel like they're deprived, at any given time.
With the help of Joe, or Dr. Mercola, I call him Joe, I was able to get on the ketogenic diet, and within 90 days I went from probably a size 14 to a size 6, under 90 days. But not only that, when I switched the diet, I immediately saw my body change, more muscle tone, and it changed. It really was changed almost overnight. So I was very fortunate, and that was 4 years ago, and I have kept the weight off ever since. So that's the hardest part. Sometimes people will yo-yo, but I was successfully able to now for 4 years eat. I still eat carbs, but eat more fat in my diet, which I think previously I had been avoiding and been misinformed, thinking like I didn't want to eat the higher fat. But also I felt better. Really, more than the looking better, the great part was feeling better. And it's such a drastic difference in such a short amount of time. I don't think people realize that you can eat healthy, delicious foods and eat more fat. And also people don't always believe it, because I think we've kind of been brainwashed for so many years, whether it was the sugar industry talking about that you had to eat low fat, And there's still people who daily will say to me, because I get a lot of people who write me, and they'll say, I'm eating low fats, and I'm thinking they don't get it yet that they can eat higher fat diet, depending on what type of fat it is, if you're eating the good fats, and that they can actually lose weight. I didn't believe it. It took, because I think for so long I had been programmed to believe that the fat would make me fat, when that wasn't true at all. Oh yeah, there were some who would listen, men and women, and some still don't. Some still don't listen. They will eat the lower fat, and they're eating a lot of high carbs, pasta. They're eating, I would say the cookies, cake, crackers, pizza, pasta, and they don't understand, but they think they have to count calories. So they're, even my own family members, they're thinking that if they eat lower calories, it'll be okay, and that they don't want to eat the high fat. But I think now, yes, some of my family has listened to me, or my friends, women, men, and that they're seeing huge improvements once they're opening their eyes to it and realizing that this is kind of been this myth for so many years that a higher fat diet was going to make them fat.
Have you seen that, where people, like, the light turns on and it's like, what? It doesn't have to be this hard. It's not supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be easy. It's supposed to feel good. I'm supposed to be nourished, and I'm supposed to get results quickly. Is that something that you saw in your own life around you?
Oh yeah, and not only with some people around me, not only with the weight loss, but they're changing their bodies, but with having had autoimmune diseases or cancer or cancer diagnosis, but also online, since I get many emails sent in to me, and of course I can't treat or diagnose, but I will just send in my book. It's free on what I did and how I ate differently. And yeah, it's amazing when you'll see people say, wow, I had this disease, or, lupus or Lyme, or I've been diagnosed with all these different autoimmune disorders, or they can't figure out what it is, and when they really change their diet, that it does make a huge difference. And I feel like it is nourishing and always organic, of course, and I do love what I eat. But what is the old phrase? I think in the past I used to live to, in some ways I would live to eat, and now I eat to live.
My name's Nikki Gratrix. I'm a nutritional therapist, and I specialise in mind-body illnesses. So ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, and the ACEs study started in the mid-1990s, and what the researchers were looking at is the correlation of emotional trauma in childhood and illness onset in adulthood. And really the study was phenomenal. It's one of the most underexposed studies done in medicine, and it really demonstrates that emotional trauma is one of the most underexposed epidemics that is underlying and is one of the root causes of chronic illness. So originally the study was done by the CDC in Kaiser Permanente, and they were looking at 17,500 adults, and the results were pretty staggering and stunning, and even the researchers were amazed by the results. So for example, if you had a high level of ACEs, these adverse childhood events, you had an increased risk of 7 out of the top 10 causes of death. And 67% of all adults said they had had an adverse childhood event. And when we talk about ACEs, exactly what are we talking about? What are they? So the researchers defined 10 different types of ACEs, and they just chose things that they had seen within the research and that were commonly understood as emotional trauma. So it's things like physical and emotional neglect, physical, sexual, or emotional abuse. It was things like incarceration of a family member, parents separating or divorce, mental illness in the family, substance abuse, things like that. So they came up with 10. And then the results showed that, for example, if you had 6 of those, you had a 20-year reduction in lifespan. If you had just 4 of those types of ACEs, you had over 400% increased risk of things like depression, Alzheimer's, mental illnesses. If you had just 2 ACEs, you had up to 100% increased risk of autoimmune diseases. So, and if you had a large number, like over 8 of ACEs, you had 3 times the risk of lung cancer and 3.5 times the risk of heart disease. One of the most obvious examples of this is to do with people who become obese in adulthood. So there's a very strong correlation of people with trauma in childhood, especially the very obese, like 100 pounds overweight plus. The number of people who are morbidly obese, who have been either sexually abused in childhood or have physical abuse in childhood, is staggering. And it's interesting that the original ACEs study actually started in a weight loss clinic. It was at Kaiser Permanente, and the researchers there were working with people who were very overweight, and they were putting them on a great diet plan, and they were doing great, the people were losing weight, but they had a 55% dropout rate. And the researchers were wondering what was going on, why was this happening? So they started to interview all the people that were dropping out. And by mistake, they actually found out that a high level of these people were reporting abuse in childhood. And for example, one woman summed it up when she said, the reason that I'm overweight is it's a self-protection mechanism from unwanted male attention. So in other words, if she was overweight, she was being protected. So a predator, a male, wouldn't come and be attracted to her and create trouble. So in her case, actually being thin is a threat to her very survival. So this is the type of person who's going to sabotage any kind of health protocol because their identity is threatened by being healthy. It's a threat to their very beingness. So, this is so important for practitioners to understand, health practitioners. We need to understand the subjective state of our patients. We need to understand their subjective history so that we can preempt this. And we are not just looking at trying to educate, we're also looking at why people behave the way they do. We all know people should stop smoking for health, and a lot of them still do it. The same as drug addicts, the same as alcoholics. So it's not the piece of education needed. Everybody can say stop smoking. You can tell somebody who's overweight, you could ask them what healthy foods they should be eating. They'll probably know exactly that vegetables and fruit are healthy, but can they do it? Because so much of food is emotional eating. And so it's not enough just to give education. You're also going to need to help people on the emotional level as well.
For me, it was accountability. It was first deciding, I have to make a change and recognizing there's a problem. Then there's the education part, like, okay, what's the right things to eat? What can I do? And then there's that accountability wherever you find it. For me, it happened to be social media at the time. Sharing there, knowing I was sharing there made me stick to it. And I shared things like I'm gonna eat unprocessed food, and I would post pictures of my recipes and what I was eating, more for accountability for myself. Like, I know I'm gonna post a picture of my breakfast or my lunch or my dinner. And what happened was I started to build this community of people, community was important, that were interested in my story and what I was doing. And they could relate. And they started following me and asking me questions, and we became friends on social media. And from there, I realized I had a bigger purpose. Like, okay, I'm going through this for a reason. Let me now educate these people that are learning from me and wanting to be a part of this. And I was able to help inspire and change so many others with their own weight loss struggles. And I think when it comes to overweight, a lot of times, it is a way of hiding past pain. So when we're not authentic and we are hiding, we're not being our true selves, sometimes we do carry that weight as it's like a protective thing. It's like shielding us. So I think once you address that, it shifts things too. I usually ask people going through transformation with me to first identify, and we do a lot of work to do this, but identify what it is that you want to feel fit and healthy for. Like, what is that? So it can't just be for a boyfriend or because my husband told me to, or what is your reason? How do you want to feel? How do you want to live? How do you want to be? And once they figure that out, everything else falls into place. Because I'll tell you right now, my diets work, but if you just jump right to the diet and you haven't done that work, they're not gonna last. You're not gonna have the best results. Any diet works, but if you do that part first, and you really know what it is you are trying to accomplish with your life and how you wanna feel, and you make that decision, then the diets start to work.
Now, if we want to get down to the nitty-gritty of weight loss, and start looking at all the different physiological aspects, as well as emotional aspects, because emotion plays a role too. But the physiological aspects of, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and this thing like, don't eat fats, watch your carbohydrates. The more vegetables that you focus on, great. Processed foods are robbing our bodies and our minds and our best beings from being the most extraordinary selves we can possibly be. Protein, lean sources of protein, chicken, beef, fish, really good sources of protein that we consume in the body. We want to really improve and increase the amount of lean protein. And fats, good fats, avocados, nuts, seeds, olive oil. These are all examples of good sources of fat that'll actually be healthy for your energy and for your brain, and will actually help you perform better. So when it comes down to choices, looking at your body every single day, you have a decision to make of what you're going to eat. 4 to 6 meals a day, small, portion amount every 3 to 4 hours, making sure you're not eating fast food out, processed foods eliminated from your diet, abstaining from alcohol, increasing your water intake.
It's amazing the power changing your diet and lifestyle has to kick your body across into this new paradigm of ketosis, where you burn fat as your primary fuel source. This is a powerful change, but the question you may now be asking is, how do I know when this change has taken place? Dr. Mercola has a few simple strategies that you can use to know for sure.
How do you know if you're making ketones? Well, there's 3 primary ways that you can test this. A common and inexpensive one is a urine screen. And while this way may work well initially, it's not a good long-term strategy. And it becomes less accurate the more you are able to burn fat as your primary fuel. So the most accurate way to check for ketones is by checking your blood. No question it's the most accurate. The problem is that you have to stick your finger with a needle to get the blood sample, and the test is somewhat pricey. Most of this, the primary one that people use is the AccuCheck, and it will check glucose and it will check ketones. There's 2 different strips for that. It doesn't measure it on the same strip, so you need 2 different blood sticks. But the ketone strip is a little expensive. It's like $4 for 1 strip, but that will give you the most precise, the most accurate one. There's a little art to it, so it's a bit frustrating sometimes until you pick up the skill set of taking the blood sample, that you might waste a few strips, which becomes frustrating when the strips are so expensive. But anyway, that is the best way. A less expensive strategy, if you're going to do it long term, is a device that measures breath acetone, which is one of the 3 ketones. This device is called Ketonix, Ketonix, and it can be ordered online, and you blow into it for 20-30 seconds, and then it will basically produce a different color, and it flashes of anywhere from 1 to 9 times, and the color level and the number of flashes indicates the depth of ketosis that you're in. So that's a useful strategy. There's no blood sticks required, and it's a simple thing, and there's no consumable, so there's no expensive strips that you have to buy every month. So that once you are able to identify that your body's making ketones from one of these methods, then you know you've reached the threshold, and then you can immediately convert to cyclical ketosis or feast-famine cycling. Now, even before you reach this level to burn fat as your primary fuel, you'll probably notice 2 of the most amazing benefits of burning fat as your primary fuel. And one, as I mentioned previously in the previous episode, is the mental clarity, your ability for you to remember things and to have mentally focused and sharp. But what's most shocking, surprising, and almost universally consistent is the freedom, and I do mean authentic freedom, that you have from cravings, especially sugar and junk food. They just disappear. And I've been passionate about using nutrition as a primary tool for myself and for my patients for decades. And I've until I started implementing the strategies that are discussed in Diet Against Disease, I never experienced this previously. It really is nothing short of magical when your cravings authentically disappear. Right. But that's the beauty of metabolic therapy and nutritional ketosis, is that once your body has transitioned to the point where you're burning fat as your primary fuel, there's this magic that occurs in your brain, and this desire, these cravings are radically suppressed to the point where it's not an exercise in willpower or discipline to refuse those. Because if you're burning carbohydrates as your primary fuel, then it is. But that transition makes it easy. So you just walk away and say, fine, I used to like it, but I don't need it anymore.
After several years of research on the low-carb diet, we opened a clinic at Duke University that pretty much uses the low-carb ketogenic diet, or ketogenic diet. So people come to me now for the lifestyle change. They don't necessarily know what lifestyle change I'm going to help them do. My practice is also known as an obesity medicine practice. And it's a holistic practice because what you eat really matters. So the way I approach people coming to me for help with obesity, with diabetes, any chronic medical condition really, arthritis gets better, heartburn, is that what you eat really matters. And I want you to eat real food, meaning food that's not in a box or a bag, generally speaking, food that your grandmother would recognize as food, not things that are processed, highly processed. So what that does is makes the food that you eat lower in carbohydrates automatically, because you're not having lots of refined sugars, you're not having lots of potatoes, pasta, rice, things like that. And that is the general principle, is eat real foods.
You have a study that's demonstrating that the low-carb diet can be particularly effective with type 2 diabetes. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. A little history. 100 years ago, the low-carb diet was used to treat diabetes. It was forgotten over the last half of the 20th century, the 1900s, and thought to be bad. So our research started with looking at the safety of the diet, and then as I was learning about the diet and that it was safe, I kind of relearned, resurrected the information from 100 years ago to get it as a treatment for diabetes. Thinking about it, remember diabetes is a condition where the blood sugar is too high. And if you want to lower the blood sugar by what you eat, then don't eat so much sugar. So the problem with that simplicity is it flies in the face of most major organizations which recommend that diabetics eat lots of carbohydrates. But I think the reason for that is most of the doctors who are treating diabetes put people on a medication, and a medication can make the blood sugar go too low, and eating carbohydrates keeps the blood sugar from going too low. So in our approach, which involves the nutrition and the medical management, if we lower the carbohydrate, then we lower the medication that treats the diabetes at the same time. So we've done studies, other people have done studies with diabetes and the ketogenic diet as well. And you just want to be sure that you do it with a doctor or a practitioner who understands how to help you lower the medications. We're trying to get the information out about the low-carb diet, and we've started a company called Heal Clinics that actually will support people and help them come off the medications.
It's mind-blowing when you realize the very medications that people are being prescribed to fix diabetes and obesity and many other problems are just actually perpetuating the problem and hindering the body from healing itself. When given the proper natural tools, your body is an amazing healing machine.
4 years into it, I had a complete toxic reaction and I lost my mind. I lost my health and I went through a very intense detox from it. It's the type of medicine that you can't stop taking it. So it completely screwed me up, the shelf life of it. That was about almost 7 years ago. And as soon as I tried to get off of that, I put on about, I say 40 pounds, but I think it was actually 50 of just pure bloated, uncomfortable fat. I had innumerable symptoms, like you can't imagine, from stomach problems and bloating and distension and rashes, chronic hives, inability to sleep. I couldn't eat. At first I couldn't gain weight and then I couldn't lose weight. Nerve issues, I would lose feeling and then I would get it back, and I couldn't taste, I couldn't smell. It was brutal. It was very brutal, and the more I tried to be healthy, the sicker I got, and the bigger I got, and the more I bloated. So that when I went for help, I was diagnosed with a million different things. I was misdiagnosed with a million different things, from RA to anxiety disorder to depression. The list just went on and on. One thing that I did test for is severe adrenal insufficiency, which didn't help. I'm 49, so I'm also menopausal, which didn't help. Dr. Mercola did help. And it was a start of about 3 years ago when he got me started on a ketogenic diet, which helped a lot. It really did.
Well, my background as a medical doctor was focused on medications, and that has its limitations for chronic diseases. In fact, the medical approach to the treatment of chronic disease really has failed us. So I'll see people who are on 10 to 12 medications for chronic diseases, so I'm not a fan of using medication. I think the best holistic approach is to get back to what nutrition you use, what you feed your body, and if you have medications, these things need to be adjusted while you change the nutrition. There are lots of ways to go about it. There are ways that emphasize vegetarian approaches, ways that emphasize approaches that allow for meat eating and vegetation eating as well. But I think the main thing is to get rid of the so-called junk foods. And the most promising change, I know it seems kind of strange, but it really is what you eat. The idea that these medications are treating the bad lifestyle is real. The bad lifestyle fixes or is the cause of all these problems, and changing the lifestyle fixes so many things. And I focus on nutrition and diet because in my world of treating people who are very sick, they can't exercise. So I guess it goes without saying, exercise of course is important, but it's not as important as diet if I'm trying to treat someone who has a lot of problems. For example, someone may come to me overweight or obese, weighing 400 pounds, they have no exercise ability, they have no energy. And so I explain to them that the diet is the most important thing. I use a ketogenic diet as my therapy. They lose 50, 100 pounds, they gain more energy, and then I introduce the other elements of a healthy lifestyle, which include exercise, stress management, having fun. I mean, the beauty of doing this as a doctor is that I see my patients get better. And we train lots of doctors around the country at the Obesity Medicine Association. It's a place where doctors learn how to help people lose weight using tools of obesity medicine, which most doctors don't know. So it's actually a very gratifying role as the doctor to see the patient get better.
And what's that like for you, seeing that? Seeing people because do you see people face to face that have recovery?
Yeah, so I'm in the clinic 4 out of 5 days at a university practice, and I would have to say my enjoyment as a doctor went from I really was just seeing people get worse, giving medication, to now I see people get better. It's very rewarding as a doctor. If you wanted to go into medicine or a health field in order to help people and see them get better, then this is for you. Use the ketogenic diet or some other obesity medicine sort of practice or a holistic approach, because people can get better and it is a lot of fun.
Start by the simple things. Get rid of the table sugar. Take it off the table. Put it in the cupboard. Don't buy a new bag. Okay, so you're going to still eat a donut or a cupcake or something like this, or you're going to go and have dessert after a meal at a restaurant and so on. But try and cut down on the intake, because without the exercise, when you add the refined sugar and you reduce the exercise, you put a much bigger demand on the insulin. So we've got to get rid of the pop drinks, the soft drinks, the refined sugar as much as possible. And starting in teenagers, starting at 30 years old, starting at 50 years old, start at some point. It's like stopping smoking. In fact, that's definitely the first thing to do is you've got to figure out how to stop smoking if you smoke. And so those are the preventive measures that are the most important ones. By moving, you're going to improve your insulin. You're probably going to reduce your blood pressure without drugs, because a lot of the drugs that are being used for hypertension and for diabetes also increase, in fact, the chance of getting Alzheimer's disease, or they put a little more pressure on the brain, if you will. So if you can get through middle age with drug-free, then that's a big step in the right direction. And how do you prevent yourself from getting hypertension in your 50s or 60s? You do a little more exercise. You try not to gain weight. Or you try to keep a stable weight. If you're 10% overweight or 20% overweight, the issue is not to yo-yo up and down, to go nuts about your diet for a month or 6 weeks or 6 months and then give up. It's like buying a treadmill to put in your house, and you're religious about using it, and then you forget about it and it gathers dust. You've got it's these approaches that are sustainable that are going to make a difference. It's not for today, it's not for tomorrow, it's for the rest of your life.
Your body's literally starving when you're obese. And that's why it's compelling you to eat more, because it can't find the nutrients it needs, because the bacteria are not there to feed it. And once the nutrients do get there, your metabolism is so used to this starvation state, it's not putting those calories into muscle, bone, brain, it's putting it into fat storage. So any calories you do consume are being stored away as fat, which is a safe depot if you're starving. If you're in a famine state, you do want to hold on to some fat. But here is the reality, is we are eating in an environment that is calorie rich, nutrient disappeared. How did the nutrient disappear from our food? How did we now start eating food that had no nutrients? Of course, it started with just processed food. In the late 1880s, we started processing wheat differently than we had ever done before. We went to steel grinding and got all the fiber out of it, and we started getting this bouncy, soft bread, things like that. And that continued over the course of the next 100 years to this incredibly bizarre chemical food chain we have. If you define food as something that comes out of the earth and then is then put on a plate, we only eat maybe 40% at best of our calories in food. The 60% or more is from chemicals that we've invented and processing techniques that we've invented to take what used to be a healthy food source and turn it into something that really doesn't even resemble food. Chicken McNugget doesn't even have any chicken in it anymore. It's just, we have these bizarre states of food that we consume. And so that was step one, was processed food. Step two of the loss of nutrients that used to keep us healthy was chemical herbicides. The weed killers that we grow our food in now. The most famous one, of course, was Roundup. Roundup led to the genetically modified crops that were Roundup ready. We genetically modified these crops so they could handle this weed killer. We now spray somewhere between 2 and 5 billion kilograms of that chemical worldwide. And so with that much toxin in the environment, you have to know that that is playing a role in the loss of nutrient from your food. How does it do that? Glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup and almost every other weed killer on the market now, is actually responsible for blocking the pathways within the bacteria of the soil, the plant, and your intestines from making the medicine of food. Let me say that again. The chemical is blocking the ability of the environment, the soil and the bacteria within it, to make the medicinal quality of the food itself. This family of compounds is called alkaloids. The alkaloids are anti-cancer, anti-asthma, anti-allergy, anti-hypertensive, anti-diabetic, antidepressant. I mean, it goes on and on. Every disease epidemic we have right now has an alkaloid within the food chain that treats it. But we put, starting in 1976, this chemical into our food chain that blocks the ability of us to make this stuff in our food. So we are eating kale and superfoods all day long that, if exposed to this chemical, never developed this medicinal quality of our food. For 5,000 years, medicine is famous for saying, "Let thy food be thy medicine." Hippocrates himself, the father of what we consider modern medicine, and way before him, the famous Chinese medicine philosophies were saying, "Let thy food be thy medicine." In the last 50 years, we've developed an environment where our food cannot be our medicine anymore. It has been starved, it has been raped of its own nutrients that would be the medicines of the future. We've taken it out of the food chain and we've turned to our pharmaceutical industries to offer those drugs back to us in the form of non-natural chemicals that are then obviously riddled with the side effects that we see every day in clinic. And so what an amazing journey we've had. So how do we get that back? Can we get it back? I think as a consumer, you should know that the very first thing you want to do, if you care for your children, grandchildren, and everybody else on the planet, you need to start talking to your Congress people. You need to start talking to the farmers out there in your environment. You need to start talking to consumers around you and say, we have to band together and demand that we allow our food to become our medicine again. We need to stop spraying these chemicals all over our food, soil, plants, trees. We're now spraying trees to kill them. I mean, it's out of control with the amount of chemical we're spraying around the world right now. We need to band together and stop this process so that our food can regenerate, so our food can relive the opportunity to become our medicine again. And if we give it the opportunity, it will do it immediately. Mother Earth has programmed into all levels of her the ability to heal, and it will heal. This Earth will heal despite our crazy mistakes. But you gotta start getting re-involved as a consumer, and the most powerful way you can do that is go grow a garden. If you grow just one tomato plant, you're making a statement. You're saying, I'm gonna take back the opportunity to participate in the medicine of food. You're gonna grow just a few plants, and then you're gonna it's a slippery slope. Once you start growing things, it gets a little fun. You tell me a kid doesn't like vegetables, I'll just tell you that's a kid who's never grown vegetables. Every kid who grows a plant will eat that food that comes off of it. And so a kid loves vegetables and fruit that he got to participate in, that she got to grow from seed, whatever it is. So Get out there, get your family out there, get your grandkids out there, grow them some food, and protest this world of chemical.
Our earth can heal itself, just like our bodies, when we remove the toxic chemicals from our environment. It's empowering to know that you can be an active participant in your own healing and the healing of everyone around you.
So that's the most profound thing that happens with a ketogenic diet, is people are so surprised at how much weight they can lose. They've struggled, they've tried the Beachbody, Whole30, all kinds of things, and they haven't made weight loss. And all of a sudden they kick into real ketogenesis and the weight just starts plummeting off of them. And anytime you can get an American or an adult or a human to see the scale move, all of a sudden it's a motivation for them to keep going, right? Anything that you can do to get that scale to budge. So as soon as you get that scale to budge, they just stick to it. We've seen some pretty dramatic weight loss. Typically in medicine, we like to say the most weight you want to lose in a week is a pound, maybe a pound and a half. But some people that kick into ketogenesis, they can lose like 5 pounds per week and not feel terrible as long as their methylation and detox pathways are working. And so we've seen incredible results with that. It's a 40-day program typically, and we've seen people lose up to 40 to, I've even had one guy lose 60 pounds. He was having terrible migraines and he was more focused on the weight, but I was more focused on the migraines. So we decided to do the 8CG diet, and so he kicked into ketogenesis, and by the end of the diet, he had lost 60 pounds and his migraines were gone.
That's incredible, man.
It was truly remarkable.
And he would have been happy and feel great. He would have felt grateful, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. He was on Topamax and Imitrex and all kinds of drugs to help manage his migraines, and he didn't really realize that the ketogenic diet was going to help him with those too.
Excellent. So he didn't need to take the migraine meds anymore?
Nope, not after that.
It went after the root of the problem.
Absolutely.
So in addition to measuring your ketones, you can also measure your blood sugar. And this does not require a prescription, and you can get these blood sugar meters really inexpensively on a very difficult to find resource called Amazon.com. And they only cost $7 for a blood glucose meter. And the one I like is made by Bayer, B-A-Y-E-R, and it's called the Contour, C-O-N-T-O-U-R. And I like it because not only is the meter inexpensive, but the strips that go in them are about half the price of most of the other strips. They're under 25 cents a strip. So you can continue to measure your glucose, because that's really important feedback to you, and it'll be really startling to you when you're doing this and you go out to a restaurant and you think you're eating healthy food or made a healthy food choice. Like I can remember when I was doing this, I went to a Thai restaurant and I thought it was a healthy choice, and then I measured my blood sugar after it and it went up like 30, 40 points. It was crazy because they loaded that food with sugar, no question about it. And hidden sugar is pervasive. There's no rule, there's no law, regulation says they can't add sugar to your food. And of course they're going to add it. It's virtually free, and it makes the food taste better, so you come back and buy more of it. So it's a common strategy. They don't tell you. It's not listed on the list of ingredients of the menu. So just so you know, it's a really useful tool, and I use that regularly. Another tool that you can use to help you identify the macronutrient ratios, remember you're going to have less than 20 to 50 grams of net carbohydrates, 30 to 60 grams of protein, and those are the two that you want to measure. But to get those measurements, you have to use a nutrient tracker of some sort. So they're not going to just read the back of the label. In fact, many of the food that you eat hopefully won't have a label because it's healthy food that you bought from the produce section. So the way that you do that is you go to a really accurate nutrient tracker. And now the most common one people heard of is MyFitnessPal, and that's what I used initially. That's what most people use because it's the most common one. And it's great, it's easy to use, and it's very well done. And unfortunately, they allow user input, crowdsourced information to be entered so that you can enter anything you want, and it'll be there not only for yourself but for anyone else, and there is no rigid effort being deployed to verify the accuracy of that information. So essentially it's really, really easy to get inaccurate and bad information. Remember, no information is better than bad information. So I don't recommend that. I recommend using Chronometer, CRONOMETER.com, and we have a special version that's /Mercola, which is specifically geared towards nutritional ketosis. And it's really easy to use, it's free, there's no charge for it, and it'll give you a nice graphical readout so that It will take a little bit of time to understand how to deploy this, maybe a few hours to get it all set up. But once it's set up, it's literally only a few minutes a day. And you don't have to do this forever, the rest of your life. You're only doing it until you get into ketosis, you get an understanding of the foods that you're eating so that you'll know. Because, literally a few weeks, a few months, whatever it takes, you'll know what types of foods are available, what your portion size should be. And a little tip on using this, especially at the beginning, it is so important to enter the food you plan on eating. Remember, because if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So enter the food that you plan on eating that day before you eat it. Why? Well, guess what? Once you've already eaten it, it's too late to take it back. So if you've doubled the amount of protein you should have or more carbohydrates, there's no way you can undo that. But if you enter it into the program first, you'll say, oh my gosh, it was too much, and then you can easily take it back because you haven't eaten it yet. So it's a great, phenomenal way to do that, and I couldn't encourage you to use it more strongly because it really is an effective tool, and that we just get rave reviews from it. So strong recommendation, a very powerful, practical resource to help you implement the strategies to help you take control of your health and start to burn fat as your primary fuel.
So there's actually a couple of different approaches, and obviously nutrition comes in here huge. And as a viewer, you're obviously tuned into this nutrition piece already. But I want to tell you there's lots of avenues to success here. And it's tempting to hear one perspective or another say, well, that must be the only way. But know that there's a lot of pathways, and the reality is you just have to get to real food. You need to take a really critical look at your plate and find the processed food there. And so step one, get rid of the process-oriented things. All of them are put into a molecular form that your body doesn't know how to deal with. They are going to be inherently very inflammatory to consume. And so step one, get to real food. And so I'm not going to even harp on you, it has to be plant-based or it has to be paleo or any of these other perspectives. You have to have real food on that plate. So step one, get there. Then after that point, it really comes time to think about how are you going to implement that into your day. What we see again and again is the lack of planning leads to poor decision making in the midst of it. And you're famous for doing a great job speaking on this.
If you don't have a plan, if you fail to have a plan, you're planning to fail.
That's it. And so whether you're at home, on your way to work and you're packing that lunch, or your kids are on the way out the door and you're packing that lunch, your job is to really prepare well. And for me, that means prepare the day before. Because if I wait till the last second, I make poor decisions because I'm stuck. I didn't have the right things in place or whatever it is. So planning ahead is obviously key to success in a lot of fashions there. And then the last caveat on if I'm planning, what am I planning for? The nut in that one is really the diversity. And so you want to get as many colors on the plate as you possibly can. You want to get as many types of food onto that plate as you can. I'm very nervous about this trend that we have of elimination diets. Everybody's gluten sensitive, then nut sensitive, then you start getting down to just a few macronutrients that these consumers are eating. That makes me very nervous because I know it's having an impact on the bacterial diversity in the gut. You eat narrow, you'll live narrow. And so getting that diversity back in there can be challenging initially because you got to regrow the bacteria that are going to handle those nutrients. So a lot of my patients coming off of those narrow avoidance types diets are going to have a little bit of a challenge. So if you're in one of those, it's kind of eliminated almost everything, you're going to need to push back into that diversity and do it in a measured fashion. That's how you're going to avoid collapse. And so if you've been avoiding all grains, do your research, look it up. What are those historic grains that humans have lived with for thousands of years? Things like amaranth and all of these incredibly diverse grain families that are just not even recognized in our modern food day. Go after those, and go after them in small amounts. And so don't eat a whole meal based on these new grains. Go after them in small doses. So reintroduce a vegetable you haven't had in a long time. You can walk down almost any vegetable aisle and be like, oh my gosh, a daikon radish. I didn't know that was what that giant white carrot thing is. And so go after those weird things on the grocery store shelf and say, I got to diversify here. I got to get some more change in my life, and that plate is a great, powerful way to do it.
And the key thing is when you do this and you're burning fat for fuel, you're not having those cravings that disappear, so you're able to implement this in a really effective way.
Huge. It's fantastic. You guys are going to go grab health on your own. Go after it. You have the power to really transform your biology today, not only in you, but also in your children, your grandchildren. The genes that you're going to turn on by eating the right things today can be programmed out generations of success in the future. So it's empowering to realize that we have the ability as consumers, as food planners, as food eaters and shoppers, we can change that whole environment. The farmers are going to have to respond to you. The legislative bodies are going to have to respond to you. And so it's really a matter of just grabbing your own potential here and become that force of change.
With what Dr. McCullough did with you, he took time, and I know that he's really, he's concerned about people's health, and I see that he's been concerned about your health and put genuine interest in your life and really wanted you to be able to get better and worked so hard to equip himself with the tools that he could bring to you and help you. And I know that you guys, you live not so far away from where he is, and you got to actually see him personally, which most people don't get to have that experience. But what do you feel towards him for what he was able to help do for you?
Absolute gratitude out of everybody. He took the time to say, I think I can help you. And that was like, I'm like, okay, let's do this. What? Very, 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 very fortunate to have had the opportunity to meet him, and extremely thankful on his quest for not only his help, but in helping as many as he can, that I was able to cross paths. And I don't know where I'd be right now without him. It kind of maybe sounds a little bit hokey, and a lot of the information isn't really earth-shattering, but being able to put it all together cohesively and have it make the most sense, life-changing. I mean, life-changing. I seriously don't know where I'd be right now if I didn't have the opportunity to meet him and have him help me take control of my health.
Wow. His information really helped you.
Absolutely. And just the believing in me, believing that health is a right. You know, everybody has the ability to be healthy. You have to fight for it sometimes and maybe wiggle around and get out of where you are, but there's no reason why everybody can't be healthy, or at least as healthy as every person can be for themselves.
Do you think he knows that how you feel towards him for what he was able to help you achieve? Do you think he knows that?
I would hope so. I believe he does. I thank him regularly because of all the trauma, of all that dis-ease, from all the crazy medical system. My God, every time I go, they just be like, oh, here. And give me all these prescriptions to treat symptoms. He's like the only person that took the time to say, what's the original? Go back farther than that, go back farther than that. He's like, let's go down to your mitochondrial level. Let's do a reset. Let's start over and build you up from the inside out. And I'm like, okay, makes perfect sense. So that's what we did. And you know what? It's working. It really is.
If you want to be truly healthy and you want to feel and be your best, then you want to do everything that you possibly can to make sure that you're operating at your best. And if we're just talking specific fat loss, well, then we obviously have to talk about exercise as well. That's a choice, and making sure that you're exercising 5 to 6 days a week. It doesn't always have to be intense, high-intensity interval training, although research is stating time and time again of the great effects of high-intensity interval training, not only on pro athletes, but even on seniors, right? Senior citizens that are doing high-intensity interval training. All of these are very, very important So exercise, nutrition, lifestyle, and of course emotion. So you talked about America being one of the unfittest countries in the world and the most obese country in the world. And part of that is because with all of the stress and anxiety, cortisol shooting through the roof, we're living in a cortisol enhanced world here. And as we do that, we're eating food that is robbing us of the energy. Well, along with that, with all the stress and anxiety, the emotion that causes, we become emotional eaters. How many people are sitting in front of TVs or in their rooms and they're just eating and they don't even know they're eating, and they're self-absorbing of any pain or the anxiety that they feel? That's not a healthy thing. And that's where we need to get professional help, and you need to make sure you're exercising, you're eating right, you have a support system around you, whether it be a nutritionist, a trainer, a coach, or professional help that can help you get on the right way. What I'm encouraging everyone to do is be proactive and to start to quarterback your own health. Quarterback your own health before the problem starts. Like today. Like today is the first day of the rest of your life. And if you truly want to be special, then get off your duff and start to work out. Start to eat right. Don't eat the stuff that you want to eat every single night because you're just mentally weak and you say you need that. You don't need that. That's willpower. And surround yourself with people that are going to support you. Maybe you need a coach. Maybe you need someone to hold you accountable because you're not showing up at the gym when you're supposed to be showing up at the gym, or you're not eating the way you want to eat. Maybe you need the help of a nutritionist or someone to help cook meals. Then do it. That's an investment in your own health. And that investment in your own health is typically 10 times less expensive than going through the traditional medical care system after the fact because you've been diagnosed with disease.
So I do a lot of online coaching with people. The biggest transformations occur in different areas of people's lives. So when they start to lose weight, they tend to feel more confident and they start working on their business where they do things that they normally wouldn't do. So that's the advantage of like losing weight. It's not just about health, it's other aspects of their life. And so they can be a more productive member of society. So that's one of the things that, again, because we're incorporating, in the programs that I like to teach, it's not just about keto and low carb diets. It's like, we're talking about circadian rhythms, we're talking about detox, we're talking about exercise, stress management, sleep, like all these elements that comprise our resting metabolic rate and our ability to burn fat or store fat we're working on. So then people have these sweeping lifestyle shifts and then they feel more awake and alive, in their lives, right? So more grateful, more opportunities. So that's what I've seen with a lot of my clients is just different changes in that regard.
My rational thinking doesn't mean anything to corporate profits and bottom lines and hospital revenues, right? The hospital has to keep its doors open. Some of these procedures are so profitable, the hospital can function. I had one guy tell me one time, if this metabolic therapy comes to the time, we have to close these hospitals. We can't keep them open. So they said, this is why it's very dangerous. And I said, dangerous to who? It's not dangerous to the cancer patient, it's dangerous to the profitability of the hospital.
Well, as someone who did go into medicine with an altruistic desire to help people, the tools we were given have lots of limitations, and basically the tools are medicines. Some of the medicines cause the problems themselves, so you're using medicine to treat the medicine's side effects. So I don't make excuses for medicines anymore, but I think a lot of doctors become frustrated because they don't see improvements in their patients. They want them, but it's because the tools they have don't work well.
Well, I think, there's across the board so many types of exposures over the course of our lifetime, every single day. Every time we eat food that's been grown conventionally, it's been sprayed with pesticides. Every time we drink out of a plastic bottle or a plastic cup, there's chemicals that are leaching from plastic. Every time we put something on our skin, whether it's a lotion or certain sunscreens, they all contain ingredients that disrupt the endocrine system, add chemicals that seep into our system, the water we drink, the exhaust fumes from cars, the exposure to certain metals.
So over time, if you begin to change the way you eat, if you begin to add just a few things to help your body detoxify, then literally the weight starts dissolving, and maybe not just the weight. Some people's diabetes has disappeared along with those fat cells as gently the toxins move out of the body and the fat moves with it. I think the most important part is becoming aware of what chemicals, what metals, what toxins that the body doesn't want to deal with are in your environment, which can you easily avoid or substitute out, and then make space for your body to do what it does well, which is right the ship, rebalance itself. And it can do that if we start removing what's getting in the way.
So some of the things you're going to learn in the next episode 5 would be the dangers of the conventional medical system and how to detox, how simple practical strategies and protocols that you probably have never heard of that can have a dramatic impact on the ability of your body to remove these toxins from your system, and even simple strategies on how to improve your dental health, which has a profound impact on your health. And frequently we're bombarded with these literally neurological poisons like mercury that's in our teeth, and if we don't take care of it correctly, it can cause metabolic havoc. Hi, this is Dr. Mercola, and if you've enjoyed the Diet Against Disease series, then I know you'll love to take the next step on your journey to optimal health. My new online course based on my best-selling book, Fat for Fuel, will help teach you to do just that. You'll learn how you can help implement the things you've seen in Diet Against Disease series, like the cyclical ketogenic diet, removing toxins from your life, and restoring your microbiome, and so much more. When you purchase the course, you'll gain immediate access to 7 comprehensive lessons that teach you the keys to help fight chronic disease, help manage cancer, and optimize your health. The knowledge from these courses has the potential to help change your life and empower you with all the tools you'll need to implement a healthy, disease-fighting lifestyle for yourself. Normally, this course costs $299, but if you act today, you can get it for the limited time discount price of just $199. All you have to do is click the button below and sign up today. By doing so, you will be taking an important step to help you and your family take control of your health. If this documentary series has had an impact on you and changed your thinking about diet and disease, then we ask for your help. Please consider supporting us in continuing to get this message to the world. You can support us by owning our collector's package. This will give you an all-access pass to our exclusive 12-part modules featuring never-before-seen footage as well as detailed diet information, weight loss, and aging solutions in this step-by-step blueprint designed to protect your health. This really powerful package is also perfect for those who want to use our detailed program for preventive, proactive measures. So by owning the Diet Against Disease Blueprint today, you'll also unite with us in our mission to save even more lives as we donate a large portion of all sales to charities, including Dr. Seyfried's groundbreaking cancer research, which could change the way the entire world treats cancer. And literally, at least in the United States alone, cut down to 1,500 needless deaths from cancer every day. Together, we can make a difference and begin solving some of the world's most frustrating and devastating medical issues with sound, natural, safe, effective, low-cost health principles. So take action now, and let's help you live the life you envision for yourself and the benefit of your loved ones.